On the 2nd of August, former American President Donald Trump was charged with plotting to overturn the 2020 election. The same election that Trump lost to now incumbent President Joe Biden. 77-year-old Donald Trump is accused on 4 counts, or indicted on 4 counts. Conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction and attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, conspiracy against rights. This indictment follows an inquiry into events leading up to the 6th of January 2021. Do you remember what happened on that day? Protesters stormed the US Capitol. These were supporters of Donald Trump. They attacked the Capitol to disrupt a joint session of Congress that was convened to certify the results of the 2020 elections. It was Trump who had encouraged his supporters to first attend a rally, and then, and here's where it gets murky, was he encouraging them to march to the Capitol and to protest the vote counting ceremony? And what exactly was it that he said? And was it free speech, or was it the incitement to something more? Now, in one of his tweets, and I quote, Donald Trump said, "Be there, will be wild." But the result was this.
I know, I've been sitting up there.
This is Special Counsel Jack Smith. He led the inquiry against Trump, and he says the 6th of January 2021 was, quote, an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy, unquote. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. What happens next? Well, the case has been assigned to U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan. What do we know about her? Well, she was born in Jamaica. It was former President Barack Obama who appointed her to the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia in 2014. This is not the first time she will be dealing with Trump. She has previously denied Trump's 2021 emergency motion to stop the National Archives records from being turned over to the January 6 committee. Back then, she had said, presidents are not kings, and the plaintiff is not president. The thing is, Donald Trump wants to be president again. He's already announced his 2024 campaign. How do you think this indictment will affect that 2024 dream? That is one of the big questions we're going to be discussing right now. Also, let's keep in mind that this is not the only case that Trump has been charged in. There are 3 in total. Trump has been charged in a federal case in Florida for mishandling of classified documents. Trump also holds a record of being the first former U.S. president to face criminal charges. This in regard to a case where Trump was indicted in New York in a hush money case. He's accused of paying off porn star Stormy Daniels to bury allegations of an extramarital affair. The trial in this case starts on the 25th of March. The trial in the classified documents case begins on the 20th of May. Earlier this week, Trump appeared before a court in Washington with regard to the January 6 case. So all in all, Trump faces 78 criminal counts in 3 cases. Like I was asking before, what does the sequence of events mean for Trump's dream of returning to the White House? Will he be able to run for office following these indictments? Now, I don't know if you already know this, but the U.S. Constitution does not stop anyone who's been indicted from running for office. In fact, you can run for president even if you are convicted, even if you are serving a jail term. And in case you happen to win, the U.S. Constitution does not stop anyone from serving as a president just because you're a criminal or because you're in jail. Now, a quick question. I'm sure it's going to occur to you. How could a president run a country from jail? It's hard to say. America, frankly, has not tested the situation yet. Could Trump be a first? Very possibly. He's been a first in many, many areas. Trump, remember, remains the front runner for Republican nomination. But He also has a long list of penalties stacking up against him. If convicted, for example, for conspiracy to defraud the United States, Trump could face 5 years in prison. If convicted of obstructing an official proceeding, Trump could face 20 years in prison. Conspiracy against rights, punishable by up to 10 years in jail. So, what are the chances that Trump will go to jail? Well, theoretically, there are plenty. Realistically speaking, it is still way too early to tell. But here's one thing that experts have time and again been saying. If Trump ends up being convicted before 2024, and if he manages to go on and then win the contest to the White House, there is a good chance that Trump could try to grant himself a pardon. Remember, the US president has the power, or the privilege if you may, to pardon a convict. But never before has a president pardoned himself. Will Trump be a first? Well, as I keep on saying, Trump's been the first in many, many areas. So too early to tell. Now, what we can tell you, though, is that Donald Trump is in no mood to wave the white flag. The former president is not giving up. He's crying prosecutorial misconduct. He has called the indictment fake. What are the Republicans saying? Well, so far, the reactions of the rest of the Republican Party have been somewhat split. On the one hand, you have Florida governor and presidential hopeful Ron DeSantis, who's promising to pardon Trump if he is elected. On the other hand, though, you have another presidential hopeful, Mike Pence. He was the vice president under Trump, and he plays a very important role in all of these indictments and all the statements that are being made. Now, Pence has accused Trump of pressurizing him to help overturn the 2020 elections. Pence claims Trump once slammed him, saying, and I quote, "You are too honest," unquote. After Trump's indictment in the January 6th case, Pence issued a statement which read, and I'm quoting once again, "Today's indictment serves as an important reminder. Anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be the president of the United States." But here's something you may want to note. Opinion polls show Republican support for Trump has surged since the first indictment was issued. He is still leading Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in the race for Republican nomination. Trump is using this spotlight to propel his campaign. While experts agree that the indictment could help Trump gather support, whether or not that support will turn into votes or, in fact, to the Republican nomination, of course, is still unclear, still remains doubtful. But strategists point out that the indictments will make it difficult for Trump to win over moderate Republicans and independents. In fact, a July poll conducted by Reuters and by Ipsos found that 37% of independents said that the criminal cases against Trump make them less likely to vote for him as president. So will Republicans risk the election by still picking Trump as their front runner? Now let me put that question to Corinne Clark. She is a Republican strategist. She's joining us from Washington, D.C. Corinne, thank you so much for being with us. Now these are serious charges that Donald Trump is facing in this indictment, far more serious than any of the earlier indictments. How is it being seen in the Republican Party?
Yeah, these are definitely the most serious charges of any against Trump, serious for Trump and also for this country, because right now he's facing charges for denying the results of the 2020 election, which previously have been protected by free speech. So it's unprecedented that a president would be charged with these crimes, but it's also for any American to be charged basically for what they have said. That is a big deal constitutionally and has enormous consequences for every private citizen in this country.
Look, many people believe that Trump may still end up being the Republican candidate. Of course, there's an entire primary process to be done. But if Trump ends up being the candidate, you could well have a situation where the candidate for American presidency is the first American president in the history of the United States to be accused of not respecting the democratic process. You could have a situation where that candidate is actually, you're going to have the question of somebody potentially who could be convicted or serving out of jail. Now, I'm not saying that the trial will be finished or will have happened by that time, But do you think this is going to become an issue in the entire primary process?
It is absolutely interesting that he would be the first one to be charged, but absolutely not the first president in history to express himself, to express that he thinks there are questions about the results of an election. This is part of democracy, is being able to express those opinions, and everybody has. I just watched a 10-minute long video of Democrats denying the results of the 2016 election. So it is unprecedented that someone would be charged. It is not unprecedented at all that someone would express doubt in democracy. That's kind of part of how it works. I do think this is clearly an attempt to interfere in the Republican primary. The timing of this is incredibly convenient. We're about 3 weeks out from the first Republican debate. I know now that this conversation at the first debate, whether Trump attends or not, will be entirely dominated by this case. So that has a huge impact on how people vote. And I think that the DOJ and the Biden administration are hoping that it impacts Trump negatively.
All right, Corinne, we hear you loud and clear. Your views on this matter are crystal clear. Thank you so much. All right, let's get a view from the other side now. Joining me, Nicole Brenner-Schmidt. She's a Democrat strategist, and she's also joining us from Washington, D.C. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us. How do you see Trump's indictment playing itself out right now? These clearly seem to be far more serious charges than in the earlier indictments.
Yeah, these are the most serious charges of all of the indictments that we've seen come so far at the former president. The reality is that the Republican base has clearly decided, the majority of them, that this doesn't affect them. They're convinced that this is a witch hunt, and they're more than happy to hear Trump and his lawyers talk out of both sides of their mouth. Within the same sentence, they will say, they're going after him right now so that it harms him during the election, to it shouldn't happen within 90 days. How is that fair? So clearly the Republican base has made up their minds here, and they will find ways to forgive him or believe that he's being persecuted. But the reality is that the independents in this country, for the same reason they rejected him in 2020, this only leads in more of, why would this be who we have lead the country? Why would this be someone who we would have be in charge? He made it clear that he could not lead this country in 4 years as president. And this just continues to pile on to that key demographic.
But look, let's face it, all the things that were said about Trump won in 2016. Trump lost in 2020, but not by that wide a margin. 3 or 4 states, there had been a few 20, 30, 40,000 votes the other side. Trump could have won again in 2020. So is it possible that Trump could now ride a wave of sympathy, of support, of people feeling, oh, look at this poor man, he's being persecuted, he's being victimized, he's being targeted, and that gets him a lot of sympathy?
No, because the reality is, while a lot of people are saying that within the base, the independents and the Democrats of this country are not saying that. People are seeing this as for what it is. No one is above the law. This indictment has been crystal clear that he had the right to say the election wasn't fair. He had the right to talk about it, but he did not have the legal means to take the actions he took. And I think the American people need to see this trial go through. We need to see someone brought to justice. We need to see this followed through.
All right, Nicole, thank you so much for joining us with that perspective. Let's see how it all pans out.